welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of Portal Talk. Along with me, I've got a stacked lineup of hoopers, hoop minds, just dope dudes in general. So everybody welcome. Along with me, let me introduce my co-cast here. We got Evan Turner, the legend from Ohio State. Adam Jardy, Ohio State's finest, knows everything about everything basketball. And then my man, Sam Maniscalco, Illinois' finest. Fellas, how we doing?
I'm doing great. I'm good. How you doing?
It's good, man. Good to see everybody again.
Yeah, cool to be here.
It is good, man. It's good, man. We have some first-time listeners beyond the Big Ten. Normally, a few of us are separate podcasts, so it's cool to kind of come together and like talk about Big Ten in general. It's almost like a little all-star game you have, right? Mid-season, you get to talk to the other guys, top players on the other rosters. But before we get going, I'm one of your other hosts, Kendal Shell. I'm from Outside the Barn, Minnesota Gophers podcast. We finished a lot better than the team last year, I will say, in the podcast rankings. But, you know, we're excited to be here, excited to bring all these minds together. So first things first, fellas, let's tip it off. Let's talk a little bit about Portal Talk. This is going to be interesting. I think this is going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun because it's a lot like the Portal. There's really no rules with it. It's a lot of unknown. We're trying to figure it out right now, and I think that's what it's about to be with us. But let me open it up to you, ET. You know, we have you as a special guest on today. Talk a little bit about the portal right now. Like, what does that word mean to you? I feel like just the topic in general is there's a lot of opinions on it. So I want to open it up to you, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the cast here just to talk through what is this transfer portal that's really changed the landscape of college basketball.
Yeah, I just label it as like bittersweet, to be honest with you. You know, it's one thing you hate to see certain players leave. You see certain situations like, a Caleb Love from North Carolina, in a sense. He went to Michigan, you know what I'm saying? I love Caleb Love in North Carolina, and now he's going to the team up north. So you hate to see that, but at the same situation as a former player, you love to see players, you know, take opportunity and get the opportunity to not get penalized and find a better situation for themselves. I think one thing that people forget is, this is this player's career, and they have to do what's best for their trajectory and, you know, what's best for them to, you know, get to the next level. And, a lot of these young guys have a dream to step up and be in the right position to be successful and to show what they can do. So I kind of, view it in that way where, I understand it and I hate it, but, it's part of the game now.
For sure, man. Sam, you guys got a lot of movement down there in Champaign. What are you thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Bittersweet is a good word. It's just there's two ways to look at it. Kendall, you mentioned when in the open, like, is this going to be fun, right? Yeah, it's really fun for us to talk about and track and all that kind of stuff. But from a team perspective or a coach's perspective and stuff, like it's craziness, right? I mean, these guys are having to recruit their own players every single season to stick around. So from that standpoint, it's wild. It's cool for us to track, right? These kids are literally clicking a button and able to, be on a different campus within 48 hours and with a different team. So it's wild, right? It's like almost like a free agency thing for college basketball players. From a player's perspective, it's just so different, right? It changes college basketball. The low majors, the mid majors now are losing kids. You develop a kid that's a freshman and he has a semi-decent year. He's looking, if he's at a low or mid-major school, I mean, I lived it. He's going to go look to enter the portal and just see what he can get and see what kind of traction he gets in there. And then on the other side of it, you got a kid that has a good sophomore or junior season at a big school, and maybe he's a little disappointing because he wasn't, playing well or didn't get the minutes he wanted. Mom and dad are mad. There's so many different factors that are involved in it. And yes, like you said, Kendall, in Champaign right now, 3 of our better players that we had big hopes for developing, over the next few years and building a foundation at Illinois, they leave. So, and we'll get into more detail about those specific players, but it's just craziness. It's wild. It's fun for us to track, obviously, and talk about. But I'm not sure it's so fun for the athletic department and the men's basketball programs in college.
Yeah, kind of imagine piggybacking on that. Yeah, sorry, Ken, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. Imagine being a coach right now, but yeah, I want to open it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the exposure for the sport right now, like you guys mentioned, this being kind of like a free agency period almost in college basketball, which creates incredible headaches for every coach. But it also keeps the sport like at the forefront of the conversation right now. I mean, I feel like I heard more talk about the transfer portal in college basketball than I did about like spring football in a lot of cases, which I think is good for the game because you're getting players' names and universities and teams in front of more faces at a time of the year where you normally wouldn't. So I think there's some good there. But to, Kendall, your point about like the craziness for coaches, I think the hardest thing about all this is that the players have the same rights now in some ways that coaches have always had. Like we've always said, like, hey, there's that great mid-major coach who's grinding and grinding, and he's earned that opportunity to go move up to a Big Ten school. Like, good for him. He got that opportunity. And I think what we're seeing is like players now get that same chance as well. Like if you grind at a mid-major for 2 years or whatever, and you earn that opportunity to go play at that dream school you've always wanted to play at, you should have that opportunity. I think that's fair. The tough thing is re-recruiting your entire roster every year, basically every day in the off season. Like that's, the process needs tweaked, and maybe this all ends with like players being university employees and you sign a contract. Like I don't know where this ultimately ends up, but like I think there's some tweaks that need to be made, but I think overall it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a good point about coaches being able to, in the past when we were playing, a coach could, like you said, just go to another school, not have to sit out, no repercussions, nothing like that. And as a player, D1 to D1, obviously you have to sit out that year. And I did that when I went from Bradley to Illinois. Now, it wasn't a transfer portal. I did the graduate transfer thing my senior year because I had a year of eligibility left. But I'll be honest, if I had to sit out a year, I probably wouldn't have transferred. So I think that is a good point as far as that. But there has to be tweaks to it because, like, you shouldn't be able to just click a button and be able to be on another campus in 48 hours.
No, and I totally understand it. I think one thing that we also take away from these are children. So sometimes, I correlated with basketball when we used to go through the lockout. Somehow all the onus fell on the players. You know what I mean? And there was no accountability on any of the owners or anybody else involved. It all seemed like the millionaires were the bad guys and the billionaires were the good guys. You know what I'm saying? And when it comes down to it, in every job, in every world, you always kind of have an end-of-year meeting or end-of-year tune-up or whatever kind of, report or survey in how you did. And I feel like as a coach, you need to put your players in the best position to be successful. But at the same time, I feel like this isn't like a lifetime achievement award. Like, coaches aren't always right. They might not always make the best decisions. And at the same time, like, this may eliminate and make coaches, step their game up and kind of, better their approach to things. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the saddest stories are the ones where you hear the young kids have a dream, go to school and just hate it. I know sometimes we always put onus on the players to be doing a terrible job or what did you do wrong? But at the same time, some of the dumbest people I ever met were coaches. You know what I'm saying? So, and sometimes I look back in certain situations and be like, how was this person in charge of guiding my future? And how serious did he take it? Because at the end of the day, it meant so much to me. And if you know anything in regards to the next level, it's not like you want to do something, or sometimes these players want to dip out and go like this, but time is everything. In the NBA, if you're 21 years old, you're viewed as too old to get drafted sometimes. Or that's at least a narrative you're chasing after. So I think like a lot of times we isolate these moments, but it all goes into a bigger picture. Sammy, you remember playing, Kendall, you remember playing, and Adam, writing for a bunch of these players. This is a $1 million gig where a lot of guys aren't touching even a percentage of what their value.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, and that gets blocked off from the situation or survival as well. I came from a situation where, we weren't the best off. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at a situation like Jameson Battle transferring from Minnesota to The Ohio State, that NIL and those type of decisions play a huge part. You know what I'm saying? And you might not understand it until you walk into that person's house and you're like, dang, they're really living bad. or that coach is driving off in a 6-figure car, and it's like, make it make sense, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You raise up a really good point when it comes to that. It's not always on the player. I think a lot of times we do assume, what did that player do wrong? And we do all know a lot of times coaches can be on something that's not quite fair. I mean, a lot of times players are young, but a lot of coaches, it could be anything, man. Like, they could just hold a grudge out of nowhere. An assistant coach could have gotten a recruit that they didn't want him to get. It's just all little things can come into play. So there are situations where I do think players are, rightful in leaving. And then I do think there are going to be situations where players going to have their parents calling, and it's going to be like, oh yeah, get out of there. And actually, it might be the player. Like, bro, are you really going hard? Like, are you really doing what you said you were going to do? You know what I mean? So it's gonna be interesting to see. But I like what you said about the coaches having to step their game up, because I do think it was a my way or the highway approach for a lot of coaches. And I think that approach can't go any longer. I think we're starting to see that with a lot of the older coaches starting to kind of migrate out the game, because I feel like they were more on that type of a coaching style versus I think the younger and newer coaches are more that players coach type personality, where they want to understand the player and get them there. But at the same point, you do need to hold these boys accountable. So it's gonna be those coaches that can kind of find that happy medium, I think, in the best way possible.
Yeah, and coaches make mistakes all the time recruiting. Every single year they get a kid that they think they're going to develop and doesn't turn out right. So now the onus is. I mean, you remember our days, like after a season back 15 years ago, and you had a player that a coach missed on, one of your teammates that everybody knew they didn't want back the following year. What did they do, right? They kind of, quote unquote, ran him out of the program in certain way, shape, or form. It was the not so great side of the business of college basketball that we got to see, and I had teammates that happened to, right? It was like, hey, in a nice way, like, go find a school that you would fit in better at than, because right now, the way we see it, we have a freshman coming in that is going to take your minutes and you're not going to play. And it probably wasn't always the easiest conversation, but it happened every single year, Now it's a little different as far as it's like, hey, there's a better opportunity for you out there. Go enter the transfer portal. Somebody's going to pick you up, and then with the NIL stuff. But Evan, I love your comment about, coaches stepping their game up, because, in the professional world, you got people that produce employees, you want to keep them happy, right? Yeah. You want to take care of them. So now the onus is on them to, like, you got kids that are producing and aren't, quote unquote, happy totally. Find a way to make them happy, right?
Yeah. And Coach Mata, one of the best coaches I've ever been around, always said players play better when they're happy. And I think one thing that works and players appreciate the most, especially as you get older and you're going from dealing with kids to young men, is like what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says, you don't manage people, you work with people. And like, how can we get to this position to get further and make sure everybody is getting the most out of it? Because now at this point, more than ever, with finances involved and everything, these dudes are viewing themselves as a business. And like, whether you think so or not, it's like the new part of the game is lobbying every day, working every single day to make sure, you keep your players happy, you keep them working for you, and you keep them, accountable. But then at the same time, you have carryover. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have carryover, the school's not going to have carryover, and you're going to see direct effect of it. Now this is going to be a thing where coaches aren't going to be staying in the job for 8 or 9 years. And you're going to start hearing your wives be like, we're moving again, we're doing this again, we're doing that, you know what I mean? And that's just a huge adjustment, so.
Yeah, I mean, we might have to see more of the NBA type approach, like real, like general managers overseeing these programs and having coaches like that are actual player development coaches, and having coaches that are more focused on these brands and like specific programs for like the NIL stuff. Like, I think the whole restructure of coaching staffs is going to be something we see real soon here. It's going to be about 3 or 4 basketball minds, but then it's going to be guys that can manage like the players, the egos, the personas. Like, I mean, you experienced it, you lived it, ET, so it's going to be more so like how you guys lived it in the league. I see come forthcoming.
Yeah, that's
and I
true.
I think it's just amazing too. I think that one of the biggest changes that's going to develop here over the next few years, once people get more comfortable with the portal, is it totally obviously changes recruiting. Right? We remember the days of rivals and getting recruited and building relationships with the coaching staff. A coaching staff coming into your living room, and you're building a relationship over 6 months, a year, et cetera, and you're going to that school because of the relationships you built. What coaches now are going into, and their staff are setting up recruiting trips and going into families' living rooms and trying to build a relationship? They don't have to do that anymore. You used to see a list every year. A list would come out of who are the top 10, 15 recruiters in the country, right? You got guys at Kentucky, you got guys at Ohio State, you got guys at Illinois, et cetera, so on down the line. I don't think you're going to see as much as those lists anymore, because you don't have to go out and recruit, because you can dip into the portal now. And if your brand is a Kentucky, your brand is a Baylor, your brand is a school that's been successful the previous few years, you're basically showcasing, your season is showcasing your team and your brand for a kid in the portal, one of the top 5 kids in the portal to come over to you, right? And then the NIL stuff, right? Who can offer the best NIL package for a kid that his value and his stock is way up here. But it just totally changes recruiting in general, right? And that relationship building process that coaches had and staffs had with high school kids and JUCO kids.
You're seeing that already in the Big Ten, I think. You look around at how some of these different coaches are assembling their rosters. I mean, like Ohio State has been very committed to still building through recruiting. They had a 5-man recruiting class last year, 4-man recruiting class this year. Purdue, you think about how Matt Painter typically runs things. Like, they're going to bring guys in, they're going to develop them, they're going to get better. Tom Izzo, he'll go to the portal occasionally if he needs to, but I mean, I think we can all agree he's obviously, a legendary coach, and he's kind of figured out how to keep doing what he's doing even in this new era. And so I think it is very interesting to see the two sort of extremes between, do we go the high school route, or do we just pass it by entirely and go get those 3 kids out of the portal and rebuild year after year after year? And I don't know, we don't have enough data yet to see which one ultimately is the best approach right now, but it's really fascinating to see the different tactics, roster building, to what Kendal was saying about different coaching staffs. Like, how many schools now start bringing in a GM or somebody like that to help oversee a roster, because that's just so vital right now. Like, Evan, when you got to Ohio State, like, we knew what the roster looked like this year and the next year and the next year and the next year. Like, that is gone. That will never come back. And so, ultimately that falls on the responsibility of the head coach, because he's the one that's putting the roster together, and he's got to pivot every year. But I think at some point you're going to see more support being given to that avenue of coaching, because it's just becoming all encompassing.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that actually is a killer that people don't, foresee is like those 2 or 3 year deal contracts that they have with other, big name schools. You know what I'm saying? Like, say we have West Virginia. West Virginia is going to be tough. They just got, Chris Kerr and a couple other big time guys. Like, say we have a few guys transfer out, that West Virginia rivalry might be a pain in the ass. Or say if we went to Maui again, like, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, it's schedules that already been set up, and the unforeseeable future is just going to be tough.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I think we'll get a little bit more into the topic a little bit later about that portal. But let's move on to just kind of X's and O's of the players. I know we've got a lot of players, a lot of movement already we need to cover. Let's get right into it. Let's start with number 1, numero uno. Not from any of our alma maters or main coverages, but Hunter Dickinson is a big name in the Big Ten. Well, I guess was a big name in the Big Ten. Hunter Dickinson was one of the early ones to jump into the portal. Right now, looks like he's the best available. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that one, man. Was that a surprise for anyone, on this call? I mean, personally, I thought him and Juwan had a really close relationship. So I'll say first and foremost, I was a little surprised. But was anybody else surprised by the Hunter Dickinson move?
Yeah, I was very surprised. I'm like, where are you going? You know what I mean? On top of the fact it's like, on top of the fact as a leader, you're just sitting here being like, I'm always big on like the head of the snake. Like, if it's a bad season, it's my fault. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And like, I just didn't dig that. I'm like, all right, bro, if you're gonna go anywhere, then go on a high note. You're leaving as a leader of the team. Like, it's not like you ain't have something to do with it. Like the building burned and you just dipped. So, but I respect, players' freedom of choice and everything. I just didn't understand it. Like, stay there, play better, and build. Like, you're one of the best players in the country, apparently, or so to speak. It should go how you go. You don't need to go follow another band or another platoon. You know what I'm saying?
His jersey was going in the rafters if he stayed, right? I mean, he was going down as in literally all-time program great. I think he could be the all-time leading scorer and rebounder in Michigan history. I think if he'd come back for one more year, like, he's been so unbelievably prolific, and he means so much that program that one from that aspect. It surprised me. I think you look back on the season and clearly, like, it did not click for Michigan this year. I mean, I had much higher expectations for them than what they showed. I actually picked them to win the league in the poll that I do every year, which just shows that I know nothing about college basketball. But I mean, I thought you're building around a.
That's the Big Ten in general, man. It's just.
Yeah,
but I was like, you've got, Juwan's son, you got Kobe Buffkin, you got Hunter Dickinson. Like, there's enough talent right there. You put a couple pieces around him, that team should compete. And it never clicked for them. It just never seemed like a year where they were on the same page. And I think when you look at it now and say, well, why is Hunter Dickinson transferring? I think the way the season played out probably gave us some clues that we just missed at the time.
Totally. I think there's something behind it that we don't know about. Like you said, I mean, a guy that has that kind of stats and that kind of career at one specific school, a big school in the Big Ten, all of a sudden leaves. I think it speaks to there's something maybe going on behind the scenes, which my point is like, hey, that's a specific situation where, and Evan, you said it, I'm all about players' freedom of choice, but it kind of changes it as far as like, what about the adversity, right? So like,
yeah.
When we were playing freshman year, sophomore year, I had some adversity. I didn't play well, or I only played 7 minutes a game, and I thought my expectations were to play more, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to fight through that. I'm not going to take the summer to the way I was taught basketball is like, you're going to go through adversity. You're going to go through tough times, right? And these players, there's going to be players that don't have a good season. Teams underachieve, right? They don't meet expectations.
Right.
Now there's an easy out button. Right? What kind of lesson is that teaching as far as I didn't have a good year like Hunter Dickinson, for example, and I'm not saying that this is him. I'm just using him as an example here.
Yeah.
Like you said, Adam, their team doesn't meet expectations. Some people had him to win the league, right? He had an okay year. I mean, he's one of the best players in the Big Ten. Maybe he feels like, I don't want to come back and work towards this goal of winning a championship with this team. I'm just going to take the easy way out and see who really wants me, where I can go, and play my last year and make the most amount of money I can, which is totally fine. I think players have that right. But I think there's just certain instances going to be throughout college basketball where whatever happened in the days of, you know what, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were, and in the depth chart, there's a player that's better than you that you got to go beat out for that position. So spend the summer working to get better as a player and come back next year and try to win that position, right? I don't think there's going to be any of that anymore. It's going to be like, you know what? I'm not happy here. I'm not happy with the coach. I'm going to go enter the portal and see where I can go where somebody likes me and wants me.
Yeah, and
there's two sides of it, right?
No, absolutely, and it's tough. And I know what I said earlier, speaking to like, putting onus on a coach and not taking it easy on like the players and everything like that. But in this situation, it's like when I thought about transferring my freshman year, one thing you might have said was like, yo, do whatever you want, but like ask yourself if you were 2 feet in. And then it's like, if you quit now, you're going to quit for the rest of your life.
Right.
And they say it's not anything to do with me. It's just legit. If you see an opening because it's too tough, then rock out. If you don't think you can play here, then cool. But if you think you can play here, you think you can work through it and get to where you want to go, that is a reason to stay. And if you leave that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And how did the rest of it work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, some say I was the best. I was the best since Jerry Lucas, right? No, I'm just joking. But it worked out.
And I think every individual,
and you learned a lot. And you learned a lot. You know what I mean?
That's the thing, like every individual situation is different, right? So you can't hand pick and choose which one's which because we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But I think it promotes a little bit of easy way out and not fighting through adversity for some. Like you said, Evan, these are kids, right? These are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Who knows who's advising them? what kind of life lessons are they getting from this portal? What kind of, does that, and a lot of it has to do with the staff, right? Like you got some old school coaches. Adam, you mentioned Purdue, you mentioned Michigan State, have not been super, super portal friendly. Well, that's Matt Painter and Tom Izzo, who are some tough, hard-nosed, old-school coaches, right? You want to take the easy way out, go ahead. But we're building from within. We're building a culture. We're building foundation. If you want to buy into our culture and our cloth, come here. If you don't, don't. So it's just not. And then you look at Brad Underwood on the other end. He's literally had to retool his roster every year from the portal, right? They don't have a culture right now because of what he's done in the portal.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You got Sky Clark. He is a top 25 freshman coming in. I think some people dubbed him as a freshman of the year. He transferred out 13 games in.
Yeah.
To Louisville. Then R.J. Melendez. He came here from Baylor. Is it from Baylor or no?
No, R.J. Melendez was a freshman sophomore.
Yeah. He had some pretty big games this year and everything. Was an intricate part. And he's out too, which is crazy. And the last one was
Jaden Epps.
Yeah, Jaden Epps.
Yeah, so some surprises there. The Sky Clark one was early on in the season, and I think it kind of threw everybody for a loop because, like you said, Evan, he was such a heralded recruit, originally committed to Kentucky and then came to Illinois. So Illinois fans were ecstatic about, the potential and expectations for him. And it sounded like early on he left the team and had some personal issues, and everybody kind of just, gave him his time, and then came out a few weeks later that he was, in fact, transferring and entering the portal. And you know what? The team conquered that hurdle and that adversity throughout the season, and Jaden Epps emerged as probably the best freshman in that class, and had a fantastic freshman year. Like when I watched him this year at Illinois, it was one of those guys, and I don't want to compare him to D. Brown, but like a guy that, listen, if this kid with the numbers he's producing as a freshman, if he stays and has a 4-year career at Illinois, he can be one of the best point guards to come through Illinois. And then R.J. Melendez was a kid that had a pretty solid freshman year. Fans were really excited about him. He was one of those kids that was like, all right, he's going to make this freshman to sophomore year jump that you see. It's like he's going to have more expectations on him. He was kind of the key cog to the team that, if he makes this jump that some guys do from freshman to sophomore year, he has a chance to be really good and the team can take off. Well, he did the opposite, right? He didn't have a good sophomore year. Expectations were high. He didn't shoot well. He just never could get going. So now all 3 guys enter the portal. So they're losing arguably 3 of their most talented guys, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Matt Meyer, who came in from Baylor, who were great pickups in the portal as far as basketball goes, but weren't great pickups as far as chemistry and culture goes, are now gone too. So, he's got to retool his whole roster again, which is crazy after he just did that last year.
Yeah, that's great. Kendal, you think your boys in Minnesota be able to pick up some of these guys from Illinois, keep them inside the Big Ten?
I don't know if Minnesota's going to be.
You guys are looking to retool a bit.
We need to.
No,
we need. Go ahead.
I'm saying talk about the loss of Jameson Battle in that situation.
Yeah, I think the Jameson Battle situation is interesting. I feel like normally you should be upset about it, maybe. That's coming from me, especially seeing him go in the Big Ten. I think that might be the only thing that gives us a little couldn't you transfer outside of the Big Ten? You know what I mean? I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah.
Transfer within the Big Ten. I just feel like coming from our, imagine when we played, right? Or, Adam, anybody you've seen, transferring a major, that was an all Big Ten caliber player as well, not just someone who was a freshman, didn't get any playing time. So this is an all Big Ten caliber player who's made all Big Ten teams transferring within the conference. I think that felt a little different. I'll be completely honest, alumni, we were in a group chat. Some were like, yo, what the hell is going on? You know what I mean? Who would do that? That's us going to Indiana back in there. So it was just some of the teams we hated. As long as it's not Wisconsin, though, don't do that. But him going there though, I'm happy for him just because I love J-Mo. He's a good dude. He's worked his ass off. He's helped. I wouldn't say rebuild the program as we came in dead last. I'm not going to act like we're doing anything great. But what he has done is Ben Johnson's trying to build a foundation, and Jameson was one of his first recruits to show like, hey, I can be an all Big Ten player. Their first year, they overachieved. So he's been someone to really help just kind of build that foundation. And I know the players all respect him, and they respect this is probably what's best for him. He's got one more year, but we're trying to really rebuild there and rebuild young in Minnesota. So we're gonna figure out what's next. It's been very slow in the transfer portal though for us. I'll be real. It's been very slow in the transfer portal. We need to go pick someone up soon. We missed out on a few. We've got a guy coming from Pepperdine. You never know with a West Coast Conference guard coming to the Big Ten. That's a completely different type of game, but I think we're gonna see a lot of this trial and error now with this transfer portal, like seeing guys from a completely different style of a West Coast Conference. Can they come into the Big Ten and play? Is the Big Ten still even the Big Ten? You know what I mean? Like, is it that powerhouse type conference? Are we gonna start moving towards more of a up and down type conference? Like, if you look at it, you've got Penn State with a new coach with Mike Rose. He's coming from VCU. They go up and down. He's brought in like 4 recruits. They're all quick, fast. So we never know what's going to happen. All the conferences, like the identities, we might have a whole identity conference. I mean, identity crisis, I think, with these conferences to figure it out. So I think that's what we're trying to figure out now in Minnesota is like, what is our identity going to be? And what do we need to do to compete at a higher level? Last year it sucked. Like, coming in last place is bad. I don't know if any of you guys I don't know if you guys have seen your team coming in last place in a while. Like, back when I played, it was Penn State every year. But like now we're looking at it and it's us. It's pretty terrible. So it's bad, but we've got a great recruit coming in Cam Christie, Max Christie's little brother. He's a dog. I'm super excited about him.
Shout out Illinois Wolves.
Yeah, shout out Illinois, exactly. A lot of people, I thought he might go there, Michigan State. Like, I was surprised, but I think that shows like what Ben Johnson is, like as a recruiter and as a coach. Like, he's a real player's coach, man, and I trust and believe in him, but our fan base is we're not patient with it right now. I mean, if you look and you see last place, like, you don't have time to be listening for like the excuses and the details, so I understand them. But yeah, we've got a great recruit coming in. We had another good recruit coming in, Dennis Evans, but we lost him to Louisville, just like your friend Sky Clark went down to Louisville. So I'll say, like, Louisville and some of these other conferences and schools, like, they're hot. They're hot. They're pulling some guys. So we just need to figure out how to compete, man. Like, that's it. We got to figure out how to compete on the NIL standpoint, on the transfer portal standpoint, and on the court.
Yeah.
It's just not a level playing field, right? As far as like the bigger schools with the bigger brands that have had success recently can literally go plug and play the top players in the portal with their roster, right?
Is that terribly?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
No, it's not terrible, but I mean, for sure. But like, Adam, sorry for cutting you off, but when you break it down, I think some of the low major schools are like clapping their hands and like, yeah, perfect. So like now when it's coming down to it, some let's just say like the best school in the Horizon League, it's like, yo, we could probably take out the bottom 6 of the Big Ten. You know what I'm saying? And now that's making better for tournament play. You know what I'm saying? And then when it's coming down for there, now you might get a FDU with a couple transfers, or a FAU with a couple transfers now. Now you're seeing more schools kind of, the margin kind of closes the gap in a sense. There's no longer we're the powerhouse more so than like it's just them and they. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think it's bad for college basketball. Go ahead, Adam. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I wonder how different, like, if the haves are continuing to be the haves and there's the delineation between the haves and the have-nots, like, in some ways, it's kind of how the sport's always been, I feel like. This is just kind of maybe bringing it more to the forefront and maybe putting a little bit more in our faces. But, like, we're kidding ourselves if we think that, like, Duke and Kentucky and Kansas and those teams aren't going to get the best players, whether it's the portal or recruiting or, dropping a bag somewhere. Like, that's just kind of how the sport has always worked. And so I think what we're seeing now is it's just much more in our faces. Like,
it's just legal
right,
now.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just...
No, I mean, it's been going on for 35 years. It's just now it's on. You can go into a internet thing and click it, and now it's legal.
Yeah, no lie. Well, Adam, who do you think has been some of the top guys to transfer into the Big Ten?
There's a couple. Like, I'm really interested. The guy that Wisconsin got, AJ Storr, I think is how you say it. Like, that's a team that we talk about building through the portal or building via recruiting. Like, they pretty much bring everybody back from a team that was decent last year I mean, there's pros and cons with rolling it back with the same group, but I think he's a really interesting piece that I think if you take that same core that maybe does what it did last year, and then you add his ability, like I'm a little bit higher on Wisconsin than maybe I would have been. I'm really intrigued by Caleb Love to Michigan. I mean, I don't know what that looks like, but like a dude might take 20 shots a game and the whole season might fall on his shoulders. Like I don't know. And I like Ace Baldwin going to Penn State. You know, we talked about them and kind of the pace that they play at, but like he's really highly rated in like every one of these recruiting or transfer lists that you see. So I'm really interested to see what that looks like. I want to see Jamison Battle at Ohio State. You know, he took a step back a little bit last year. He wasn't the same player. Ohio State, I don't think they need him to be a go-to guy, but they need him to get them some buckets and make some shots and stretch the floor. Does he do that? I think, there's enough of a trajectory. You say probably, but I'm really interested to see that fit. Those are some of the guys kind of at the top of my list. And Khalil Ware going to Indiana. You know, you got a dude there that is just he's got the tools. You know, it's been interesting how much over his career people have been willing to publicly say he doesn't have the drive or the motor or whatever. Like that's been the narrative around him for a long time. So does Mike Woodson get that out of him? Does he step into that void that that Indiana suddenly has? Like he's got a heck of a lot of talent. It's really interesting because you got a lot of these guys where I don't know how many of them you say, man, that's a home run, slam dunk get. But some guys that I think make some really interesting additions that maybe can take a team from middle of the pack to, maybe in contention for a title.
Yeah.
Do you think it ever changes? Like, sorry, Kendall.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask everybody, like, do you think, how does this portal change? Like, are there going to end up being restrictions, like you can't transfer within the same conference? Or, like, do you think there's ever going to be any kind of changes or tweaks to how it currently is?
I can't see. I mean, because it's tough to restrict. I feel like restrict the kid from making a certain decision based on athletic reasons alone. I feel like that's just against some type of rule. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I agree.
I don't know how you tweak it, man. I really do not know how you tweak it. I really don't. It's a wild, wild west right now.
Yeah, when I transferred in 2011, I did the graduate transfer thing, but I had restrictions. Like our AD at our institution at Bradley said that I could not transfer within conference, and I could not transfer to anybody on the schedule the following year.
Yeah, really?
So I wasn't able to talk to any of those schools, and that's because of what the institution decided, which was kind of crap. Right now, I wouldn't have transferred anywhere in conference, but
was that before they made the rule of allowing you to transfer? Didn't they make a rule recently, like when you're allowed to transfer in the same conference and like get a scholarship and not sit out like 2 years or something like that?
I'm not sure. I had the year of eligibility, and my only restrictions were that I couldn't.
That's crazy.
To release, this is what it was. In order for Bradley to release me from my scholarship and release me to talk to other schools, I had to agree not to transfer in conference or anybody on the schedule.
Oh,
That's
I could see. I could see that happening.
Right. So
I could see that happening. Like I think Adam said.
but how do you control that? Right. That was my question.
Yeah,
I think they'll
you
give,
can.
like Adam said earlier,
Can.
employment contracts. The employment contracts, I think, it'll probably be a line item. I think the letter of intent,
Like a non-compete.
Contracts. Yeah, it'll be a non-compete. Just what they did to you, Sam. Now we're going to see that school's going to have that on paper. They're going to look at their schedules, and it'll be probably 1-year contracts, and they'll have like different specifics. But yeah, we probably see that coming into play now more. Like players are going to need people to look over these contracts as well too. Like it's not just signing and being happy too. They'll need representation probably too.
Man, that's serious. It sounds like a real pro thing.
It really does. Yeah. And
Yeah.
It totally does. Sounds like
I mean, how
agency.
long is college? Or how long? Not saying that. I think college sports will always be around, but like when you break it down, is this overseas with education? You know what I mean?
And it's interesting too, like the whole collective world, still trying to get a feel for what that all looks like. But like, that there's no athletic department that's happy about a setup where money is going to an outside organization that is then going to their players that they can sort of work with, but they can't really direct, and they can't use it as an indictment or an inducement. Like come here, we're recruiting you, this is what you're going to get. Like, there's no athletic department that is comfortable with letting other organizations have control over their athletes. So I've got to think that as this thing goes along, like, that just becomes part of the university, and whether that's they absorb the collectives or everything just goes through the university. And like, yeah, there's contracts, and that's going to be a really hard sell for a lot of people who just cannot envision a world where college athletes are paid employees. But I mean, that's basically what we're dealing with right now, just not in name. I think that's, if you're going to simplify this process at all and make it streamlined or make it less chaotic, like, it's gonna be multi-year contracts and everything going through the university. That's where I think it's headed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good segue into kind of this final little segment here. I think we just jumped right onto this word on campus that we're already talking about. And I think it is the transfer portal. I think it's the current state of college basketball. ET, you just alluded to it. Like, is it turning into overseas with education? I want to hear your guys' opinions on it, like your real raw opinions on the state of college basketball, and specifically, where do you feel it's going and how do you feel about it? Reason I say it, like, we've seen a lot in the news lately, stuff that's really been out there, guys like a Dick Vitale, even guys within our conference like a Fran McCaffrey, they've gone on record and kind of given their opinions on where they see this is all headed and, why they feel how they feel. And I think we've all had great conversation around it. We all know the importance of adversity. We all also know the importance of players having their own power to make decisions for themselves as well too. So I want to hear from you guys. I'm gonna open it up to you, Adam. I feel like ET's got a lot of stuff to say, and Sam as well. So let me let you guys get your thoughts together. I'm gonna open it up to you, Adam. How do you feel about it, man? You've been seeing it for years. Where do you feel it's going, and how do you feel about it going there?
I mean, I think it's exciting because I feel like things are changing, and I think it's neat to be part of an era where we're all going to look back on this and say that was a transformational time for the sport. And I think, like I said, it's helping from an exposure standpoint right now that we're talking about. I mean, what would we have talked about on this podcast 4 years ago this time of year? Like, I don't know, what about the recruits that'll be on campuses in 6 months, and like it gives us real important like things to talk about right now. And so I think it helps from an exposure standpoint. I think it hurts from a continuity standpoint, and I hear it from fans all the time that they don't know who's on a roster. One of the most read things that I write every year at the beginning of the season is who's on the roster. Like, our subscribers at the Dispatch who live in Columbus and follow Ohio State don't always know that. Like, that's the world that this is turning into. And so I think there's some debt, or that hurts to an extent. But, I still think at the end of the day, whoever's on these rosters, like, you're still going to care about your alma mater. You're still going to care about that program that you were rooting for 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. That's never going away. And so the interest is always going to be there. How many times have we heard over the last few years that this is going to be the death knell of college basketball, whether it's this league, this rule, that rule. Like, we always hear it. College basketball is always going to be here. And I think it's always going to have the attention of the public. It's just right now trying to figure out like how that all fits together like I said, it's fascinating to me in my job because there's so many new things to write about.
Yeah, I think we're really seeing, it's always been, so listen, college basketball's always been a business, right? I didn't know it when I was in 2007 going to play college basketball. It was more about the authenticity. I was an athlete. I wanted to be the best player I could possibly be. I made it to the Division I level. I never thought about the business of college basketball back here, but now the business of college basketball is exposed, right? Like you said, Adam, like everybody knows it because of social media and because of the transfer portal. Everybody knows now that college basketball is a business, right? So the average consumer, I think it takes away a little bit of the authenticity of what kind of we grew up in, probably, of college basketball. But like you said, people are still going to pay attention because it presents a new unknown and a new excitement about the teams getting different players every year. And like you said, your fans from your Indiana's, your Ohio State, your Illinois fans are always going to be Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio State fans, right? It's just a little different for me personally looking at it. It's more business oriented. and it's not totally authentic school pride type. Like, I want to go to Illinois and I want to be there for 4 years. I'm going to be, it's going to be what I'm remembered as. There's none of that anymore, I don't think.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't. No, I really don't have an answer on where it will go. To be honest with you, I hope it sticks around. Just dealing with NIL or being part of NIL groups. I think it's a part of alumni right now to try to keep those players in. But I think eventually it's going to have to move. I just want to see the NCAA, open up, more of themselves and more of the money to, really help pay the players. And it really is a business. So I want to see the players get a percentage from every Final Four, from every NCAA run, from every tournament run, from every invitational and all that other cool stuff. So I think that's what's going to be, the next step, I guess.
Does the NCAA exist in 7 years? Or do the power conferences with all this, that have all the resources, create their own college basketball, league or whatever you want to call it, and the mid majors and low majors are, does the NCAA exist? I don't know.
Might be different in different sports.
You're right.
Sorry, the money that is still coming in through the TV contracts for college basketball, and that's for the next 9-10 years, the billions of dollars.
Yeah.
The NCAA will exist if only to put on the NCAA tournament and fulfill those contracts at least through that point for college basketball.
Right.
Yeah. And then, when JJ Redick said it 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, dang, the NCAA is coming to an end. And then, it's still around. So I think the NCAA will be here. But, of course, Adam, you're correct. That could be another thing.
Yeah. It could be here. It could be here. But, yeah, I agree with all your points. You guys said it best, really. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to force a lot of adults to step their games up. I think, E.T., to your point earlier, I think for a long time it's been this business. It's been these coaches that have kind of done shady stuff. Maybe within the NCAA there's been shady stuff. There's been a lot of stuff where I think there's been laziness around really developing this. And now, it's all in front of us. We see the business. Players see their brand value. Like you said, E.T., now they're going to start figuring out how to negotiate ways to get percentage of Final Fours they make it to and things of that nature. Like we talked about earlier, colleges are going to need to start putting in general managers to really manage these players and develop these players the right way and to keep them around and to keep the rosters healthy. And then the NCAA is going to have to figure it out. I think they, like you said, they have about an 8 or 9 year window where they can figure this thing out. Until that TV rights deal is done, I 100% could see the Power 5 conferences live golf in this thing and going in their own TV rights deal and making it happen, because they could do that. So I think it just forces I don't want to see that, but I think it does force the hand to the NCAA to make some decisions that are better for the game. I think it forces parents, to make better decisions as well too. I think that's the only fear I have around all this, is the whole adversity piece. Coming from somebody who deals with youth basketball players a lot, who's trained youth basketball players a lot, it's not the kids that are a problem right now when I'm training them or when I'm mentoring them or developing them. And that's what my coaches say as well. It's the parents. And when we talk about just running from adversity, a lot of the time I think it's going to be these parents that are going to, do that in these situations. So yeah, we're going to see it being like a wild, wild west, but we can also see more sound decisions from these players if the parents and the people around them also are better about it and better about this entire thing. But yeah, I don't think there's a reason to blame these kids for what's going on. I think the reason why we're in this spot is because the NCAA knew this was a problem when we were writing sport management papers about this decades ago. We knew this was a problem. We knew athletes were going to get paid. They had plenty time to prepare for this, and now they aren't prepared, and now everyone's like, oh, it's the athlete's fault. They're leaving for money. College is over. Well, no. The adults need to figure this out and figure out how to make this work. Otherwise, it's going to turn into the OTEs of the world and the Power 5 conference live golf type things of the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, and 15 years ago, I was called a student athlete. That was the term used for... I haven't seen student athlete used probably at all in the last 2 years, which is fine. But it's just different, right? it's like you said, Evan, it's like almost overseas without the education in a sense.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, how does that transferring that easily? How does that affect the curriculum? A kid, you know what I mean, that is picked a major at one school or whatnot. And I'm not Mr. Education by any means. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
Like,
No, you're right. Fuck it.
there's a lot of times I wasn't in class, but it just like you said, Kendall, like the parents, it's tough for them to navigate too now, right? Because you got a lot of parents that kids they're really into being a student too, and their parents want them to get an education and graduate in 4 years or whatnot, and that throws another mix in this kind of stuff, you know.
It's wild, bro. It's truly wild.
All I want to say is that I wish I was a senior in high school now that was going to be a Division I athlete, and not that I didn't enjoy my time from 2007 to 2011 in college, but it seems kind of fun right now if you were a top recruit.
Nah, but you know, it's always fun when you're like wandering around like young and dumb. So we're playing big time basketball for free.
Yeah.
and like I broke my back doing it, and you tore up your ankle doing it.
I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah, for sure. And like during that time, like we both do well and we're both okay, and like I think we've known each other since we were like 14. We learned a lot from it, but I think those battles are what make you, and like sticking around in like the old way is, you know, what really made me tough and made me who I am. And hopefully, obviously the game's gonna be changed, but I hope the kids are able to learn their toughness and learn like those lessons that are necessary in what the game of basketball was taught and sports was meant for. You know, full-heartedly, along with making money. You know, when money comes in, everything kind of gets messed up. But, you know, you can only be a kid for so long, and these are like the glory days before, like what Billy Haywood said in Little Big League. Sports are for kids, adults just ruin them. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, you built a lot of scar tissue those years growing up and playing college basketball, and I could sit here and say that there's a lot of parallels and lessons I learned that parallel with me right now in my life 15 years later that I use still, you know. So I hope that doesn't go away for these kids.
Me either. All right, fellas. Well, man, I think that's a great way to end it. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. First episode, Portal Talk. It's going to be fun. Like I said, this was a great conversation. I think it's going to provoke a lot more conversations, but Sam, Adam, E.T., appreciate you fellas, man. I love getting on with brilliant basketball minds. I always learn something. I learned something today, so I appreciate you fellas. Everybody, thank you for listening. The good people at New Amendment, appreciate you for putting this on all the time. For Portal Talk, I'm Kendal Shell. We'll see you guys later.
Beyond the Big Ten is a network of podcasts that aims to be your go-to resource for all things Big Ten. We cover the entire conference with shows hosted by ex-players and athletic alumni, aiming to be your go-to source of information and entertainment for your favorite team. Hosted by ex-Big Ten players, media, and insiders, our podcasts are focused on giving diehard fans and those alums an inside scoop about the teams and people that make the Big Ten Conference one of the most watched and most talked about conferences in sports. We're excited to talk Big Ten basketball with you wherever you may be. Subscribe now.